Hi, welcome everyone, and happy St. Patrick's Day. It's another AIA Colorado Virtual Connect, our continuing series to keep the profession connected together and learn more about what's happening in your neck of the woods. Today, we've got a really great presentation lined up from the Business of Architecture Committee. Their session, Remote Work, Here to Stay, ? Will be led by the AIA Colorado Business of Architecture Knowledge Community Chair, Amanda Christianson. Amanda brings over a decade of experience in architecture and project management to her role as principal at Roland and Broughton's Denver studio. Today, Amanda joins us remotely from home, along with a panel of firm leaders to discuss office reentry and the future of remote working. Just a reminder for everyone, this session has been approved for one AIA CES learning unit, and we hope you'll stick around to the end to get that full credit. Amanda, it sounds like R&B is working to formalize a hybrid model of its own, and that you've learned a whole lot in the last year like the rest of us have.
Thanks, Mike. That's definitely very true. I think everyone has their own stories of successes and challenges. And our firm, like many, is looking for solutions to strengthen our team collaboration and mentorship for our emerging professionals through these difficult times. It's interesting because we've offered hybrid working model, kind of as something to offer work-life balance, but then over the course of the pandemic, it became an inevitability for the safety of our people. So I'm really looking forward to where we go from here, and I'm glad that we can have this conversation today.
Well, let's hear what everybody else is dealing with. We've got some great questions lined up, and I'll turn it over to you to engage the audience a little bit.
Absolutely. So our panelists will be joining us here. As we get them on the screen, I would like everybody to answer one of the survey questions that we have prepared for everybody. Momentarily, you'll get a batch of questions to pop up, and we'd love to learn from our audience what kind of remote working policies that you have been experiencing throughout the pandemic. So our panelists here today, I would love for them to all introduce themselves and give us a little bit of a insight into what you've been dealing with briefly over the course of the past 12 months. And we'll start with Liz Hallas.
Hi, everybody. I'm Liz Hallas with Anderson Hallas Architects, and I'm happy to be here and talk about our experience so far. We're a firm of about 20 folks, and we work on community-based projects throughout the West. I would say that, we, like probably all of you, pivoted really quickly back about a year ago, and have been really impressed with our team's flexibility in their, attitude and ability to just do that pivot and keep rolling and keep our projects moving for our clients. So it's been a really positive experience so far. Certainly been a lot of challenges, but our team has really stepped up to the challenge.
Thanks, Liz. I'm Brenda Costello. I'm the healthcare studio leader for the Smith Group office here in Denver, Colorado. We're an international A&E firm of about 1,200 people, and certainly have offices nationwide in addition to the overseas, and had worked remotely and connectivity wise from a cross office perspective even before the pandemic. So it was certainly something that we had to navigate, but we were able to navigate that smoothly given that we worked cross office on a regular basis prior to the pandemic happening. We focus on healthcare, science and tech, higher ed, workplace, interiors, engineering. I'm sure I'm forgetting one or two folks, but happy to be with you here today and share some of the best practices and positives that have come out of it in addition to some of the hardships.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Mike Bache. I'm with Studio B Architecture and Interiors. We were founded in 1991 in Aspen, but we currently have 2 studios now. So we have one in Aspen and we have one in Boulder. So I direct the studio in Boulder, and Scotland now directs the one in Aspen. Currently, we have about 15 folks. So we have 7 here in Boulder, and then another 8 up in Aspen. So I think that we've been navigating the the pandemic fairly well. It's kind of been interesting because working in kind of two different studios where we're typically pretty collaborative between the two, but having to navigate different restrictions there versus down here. And, even, the cross-pollination that we had a lot of people that kind of travel typically between the two. So we, try and make sure that we're maintaining that collaboration. In Boulder right now, we're about 50% of our capacity. So it's 3 people, and we end up kind of generating a schedule every week and rotating people through, and everyone has a less kind of fixed workstation, but laptops and connecting through a VPN and different kind of docking stations. The Aspen office is a little different. They're primarily kind of maxed up. They're a little bit lower than capacity too, but they're the in-person kind of collaboration and super important, pretty critical in that environment. So it's kind of a hybrid of a hybrid for us right now. So.
Our last panelist is Mary Morissette, FAA. If you could give us a little bit of an insight into what you've been doing for remote working over the.
Sure. Hi, everyone, and happy St. Patrick's Day. And I first just want to say thank you to AIA for kind of keeping this all going through the year. It really has been a challenge, and I know our community is so tight and we miss each other. And, I just feel that the efforts that have been taken are much appreciated. So I am Mary Morissette. I'm a principal and lead the healthcare studio for the Denver office of Horde Copeland Mock Architects. We're a national firm with offices in Baltimore, Alexandria, Virginia, Charlotte, North Carolina, and Denver. We have multi-market sectors. We are healthcare, education, both higher ed and K through 12, senior living, multifamily housing, and landscape architecture. And we also have interior design. If you see a black cat running across my screen, I have a kitten and she wants to be involved in this presentation. Anyway, it was interesting. Some of the outcomes, HCM had invested pretty heavily in technology. Each of our offices had recently moved into new space, and part of the commitment was technology. And, so we could take our laptops and move, from different spaces within the office. Who knew we were going to be taking our laptops home and moving them there and not coming back? But I think that switch to technology really was pretty seamless for our company. And while we miss the collaboration in our office, and there have been so many impacts from the personal relationships, the mentoring, the learning, one of the pluses that we've seen across our company is that we're working more as a company. We're breaking down the silos of the offices, the geographics, the market sectors, and really coming together, which has been very positive. It's very rewarding to know that we really are using our staff and their talents at their highest and best use, because anymore, it doesn't matter where someone is. Clients are all of a sudden open to people working remotely where they weren't before. So, I have seen some positives. The negative, which for me has probably been the most impactful to mentoring and growing people's professional development, is the lack of mentoring. Whether it's learning management or technology or technical applications of architecture, a whole list of things. We're just missing that in our profession. And I think we all collectively are going to have to work really hard to gain back what has been lost over this COVID year. So I'll leave it at that for now, and we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it's been so great to hear about how some of the different models are working. Just a really quick note from what we received from our survey results, so we know what other people have been experiencing. We have about let's see, what do we have in here? It's about split half and half, that's right, between fully remote and partially remote. And everyone in the future does really believe that they're going to be in a hybrid working scenario in the future. About 75% of the respondents responded that way. Well, Mary, you kicked us off well with some of the challenges and some of the successes. Liz, I was wondering if I could ask you, what have been some of your biggest challenges in managing remote work over the last year?
I think that it's similar to some of what's been said so far is just trying to stay engaged with our team. As I mentioned, we're a team of 20. And so it's taken, we could certainly lean on the strong relationships that we had going into it, but we actually hired 4 new people in the course of the last year. And so trying to get them kind of onboarded and understanding who everybody was and, what we do in our culture, that was a little bit challenging and continues to be challenging. And so that's required us to just pay a little bit more attention to making sure, as leaders within the firm, that we're reaching out to people one-on-one, and then also just trying to make sure that that cross connection within the team is happening, and then that, beyond just project connections, but just making sure that we have some avenues of, we've got design dialogues one Friday a month at lunchtime where we all get together and have different topics that we have. We also have happy hour, like I'm sure many of you do, but just trying to be a little bit more purposeful with those social connections outside of the work that we do, but trying to kind of just help people connect in other ways. So that's one of the, the kind of more challenging aspects and some of what we've been doing to overcome that.
Brenna, did you have a follow-up comment?
Sure. I think in addition to what you mentioned, Liz, which is all so true and so challenging, is to keep that personal aspect up. And it, in addition to the work model, the Academy of Architecture for Health heard loud and clear from our membership that we are needing that mentorship avenue, that we're not able to connect as we would to just sit down and go over a drawing or informally, help another teammate out, whether it's the mentor to mentee connection, regardless of age or experience. And so we've created a mentorship program that includes 3 different clusters on the East Coast, Central, and West Coast of mentor mentees. So it's a grouping of 6 that'll have that dialogue back and forth. And we're hopeful to have some lessons learned in this pilot year as to how we can continue to have that mentorship grow, even if we are back in some sort of in-person work environment. But how can we keep that connectivity up and still provide that mentorship for our community?
Yeah, absolutely. Mary, I know that you talked specifically about how the mentorship structure is something that's really difficult to achieve and has maybe been lost a little bit over the last year. What has your mentorship program looked like so far using this remote model?
We, as Brenna and Liz have said, we've worked really hard and very conscientiously to make sure that we're connecting and have programs in place so that folks can learn. HCM has a series of action teams, and whether they're focused on technical advancement, management, people, we had a whole month of ethnic diversity and inclusiveness. We had a film series. So we have groups of people that have come together that are specifically working on whether it's process improvement, cultural expansion and inclusion. And I think that because each of those action teams are represented by individuals across the geographical stretch or reach of our company, that we're really having an impact on raising the level of talent within the firm collectively, no matter what level you're at. There's a conscientious effort to make sure that people are not getting lost, because we all have these discussions about introverts and extroverts, and we have our Zoom happy hours, and the ones that are always talking over each other because they're so enthusiastic and excited, and then others that just aren't comfortable with that. So really trying to acknowledge what other people are going through, having empathy for new people. Liz said you brought on 4 new people. I sit back and think, can I imagine what it would have been like for me to join a company and never get to work with those people? So, I think finding empathy within a well-structured balance of topics to keep people engaged has been really successful for us. And, and that's something that will continue. The action teams we had certainly before COVID, I think they've grown and strengthened during COVID. And I think they'll remain in place and go on to shape the company as we move forward.
That's great. That's really encouraging. Mike, I'd like to hear from you next. Have you seen any differences in team performance between remote working and an office? I know that it sounds like you have a hybrid model, and kind of interested in understanding a little bit more about how that might impact how your team is working all together.
No, in a weird way, no. I mean, maybe other people have kind of experienced the same thing. That I think productivity-wise, I feel like everyone is been doing fantastic. I think we have like a really talented staff, and I think we're, both, them and us have a lot of kind of trust in each other too, that we're able to kind of set up some clear kind of milestones. Everyone's either, crushing those or doing really well. To some degree, it feels like there's almost the other end too, that we almost need to make sure we have kind of limits to where it's easy just to, wake up, start working, keep working past, because it's, winter and, can't really go anyplace. So you're kind of working a lot, just trying to make sure that people aren't working too much and they're just maintaining kind of that healthy life balance, kind of an emphasis on just making sure that you almost have the same, trying to get into the daily routines. I think starting off in the pandemic, I think those kind of routines kind of went out of whack a little bit, and then everyone's kind of regrouped pretty seamlessly, that you're able to kind of find a way to work out. Everyone kind of wakes up, has their workstation that's in a more thoughtful place too. Or early on, there's a lot more kind of closet offices and things like that, where now I think people are able to kind of set up with a window and have something nice and just get into that healthy routine. That people have been remarkably connected. There's always the occasional VPN catastrophe and those kind of things, and Zoom calls and whatever 1,000 different teleconferencing avenues there are, just trying to go through those logistics of how many I can hear you, you can't hear me, and all those kind of conversations that we have a million times a day. But for the most part, I think people are doing really well.
That's great. Kind of an open question for the group. Is anybody else finding it difficult to kind of make sure we're keeping work and life balanced well for all of our team members? Does anyone else have noticed that is increasingly difficult to have their team members, keep in check? Are we doing anything to help them do that? Liz.
Yeah, I'll mention. So it's interesting, just across our team and across our clients, I'm seeing emails that span more hours of the day than I recall seeing. I've always been one of those people that does work odd hours at times, and it's surprising to me when somebody pings me back. I'm like, oh my gosh, they are online. So I mean, I think that is something to be aware of, and trying as we can. It's definitely a balance of supporting people, but it really comes down to needing them to kind of help define what works for them. And there is a huge disparity between some people who have maybe a nice quiet spot at home, might prefer to work at home, and then someone who might have a few toddlers and it might be a little crazy to try to do that, and so they might need longer hours. So trying to be flexible with that, but that's definitely been a challenge. I think the working parents who have been trying to keep up with all of the changes with either childcare or schooling, or even just this week here in Denver, of course, having snow days or remote days. It's a lot to keep up with, and it certainly shows all of our humanity. And that's been interesting both across with clients and within our team. I think Mary's kitten and my puppy, and it's just all of those little things that you wouldn't have known those things maybe a year ago, and how we were all operating, and in a nice way that kind of breaks down some barriers, especially sometimes with clients, just to we are all human, and we all have our challenges of how we're navigating this within our families, and that can be something that's more of an equalizer than maybe just the typical professional relationship. And then of course there are times when you may not really want to expose yourself that way to a client, so it can be awkward too. So it's definitely a balancing act.
Absolutely. Brenna or Mary, did you guys have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I wanted to jump in, and this isn't really a direct answer to your question, but I think it's an important component. We've all been working at home, and I think that we just all work all the time. It's always here, no matter, the computer is always there. But, another aspect of this has been clients that have asked our staff, and I'm sure we've all experienced this, to actually come to meetings and be on site. And, I think that that's an interesting dynamic of this kind of, new work environment where we're working at home, but we're going to meetings, and, then there may be all the anxiety around that. Is it safe? So, while it's not directly answering the question about the life balance and working at home, I do think it's a critical component of what people have been experiencing during COVID that probably just isn't talked about enough. We talk a lot about the stress and anxiety of working all the time, but not for people who are asked to maybe expose themselves to the risks. So just wanted to add that.
Very good comment. Brenna, I didn't know if you wanted to add something to that.
Yeah, if I could add just one more piece, it was a perfect segue, Mary, because I think we had instituted back in March of last year what was called a no judgment policy across the whole firm. So 1,200 people, if you needed to be online at a certain time or not online at another time, in the office, out of the office, regardless of, there were no questions asked. You needed to do what you need to do for your family and for yourself, and we won't address that with you unless you feel comfortable talking about it. And I think to your point, Mary, so if someone said, no, I can't go on site, I'm not going to ask them why or why not. We'll just say, okay, and we move on and we find another plan. And I think that's been really important in our culture, to have everyone understand that they have a voice in what they can do and how comfortable they feel, because everyone feels differently in this situation. Even before vaccines were out, people were more willing versus not willing to go out. You may have an underlying condition that we didn't know about prior to this that now makes you more concerned. And I congratulate our senior leadership for such a policy and being able to implement that across such a large firm, and successfully, because it's been, every office has talked about how positive that's made everyone feel about their own, being able to take ownership of their career and what's happening right now, in addition to what their life might be bringing in the background. And hopefully you can hear the background of the two toddlers that are running around upstairs here. So
no, we can't.
Which is always a noisy background.
Well, I think everyone's got those. I love that we're talking a little bit about when we are being asked to be in person, because it's not always avoidable. And it's something that, not unlike what Mary's talked about, we have had some clients that have requested to see us in person. And sometimes we even find that it's kind of difficult to kind of foster the same types of productive relationships and productive meetings with clients if we're only relying on Zoom and or other kind of digital technologies to do so. So I'm really interested in some of the perspectives of our panelists on how your client relationships may have changed as a result of really relying on digital tools when you can't necessarily be in person, or being in person just isn't something that we feel safe doing. Liz, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. So I think that what came to mind immediately was facilitating meetings. We do, and to Mary's point, not just going on a 2A meeting or a site walk. We do a lot of work all across the West. And so we've had site visits, flying, driving, road trips, hotels, et cetera, all the way through. It certainly did slow down at one point. And in fact, have the term of travelanche of when things open up and getting on some of those site visits. And so that's been something that has been a challenge, kind of on even a larger scale to navigate of who of our team of 20 has been comfortable doing those and, and trying to keep the projects moving if a team member isn't comfortable. So that's definitely been something that we've been trying to work through. And so far it's been working. I think right now where I usually would travel 2 to 3 times a month, I'm traveling, it's slowed down to about 1 time a month because there are a lot of, meetings that would have been in person that can be done on Zoom. But to your question, I think in terms of kind of the client side, facilitating meetings. So that's been a little bit it's just too draining. What might have been an all-day charrette or an all-day meeting, that might have been 8 hours, but kind of, broken up and in person. And there's some energy in a room that's created. Trying to do those remotely have been a little bit more draining. And so we've actually changed that dynamic. We have a standard type of meeting that we run rather than trying to do it in a full 8-hour day, which is just too much. We break it out over 3 days and do kind of an afternoon, and a morning. And we've done enough of those that seems to be kind of a good way to break out the energy of leading a group of 20 through the process that we use. So that's been one difference. But I also think that, similar to kind of what I said before, there have been a lot of maybe not our direct contacts on a project, but maybe some ancillary people where I may never have met them face to face, just in the course, it would be, emails and contracts and whatnot. And then just being able to, put a face with that person has been kind of nice to, as a change dynamic with our client side. So that's been, I think, an unexpected positive, where it was like, I didn't know what I was missing. And then all of a sudden, getting to meet those people and engage with them a little bit, more personally in this time has been interesting. Not sure if that answered your question, Amanda.
No, that's great. No, I loved hearing about how you actually took something that worked well for you and found another way to be perhaps equally as effective in your ability to collaborate and while not draining. I think that's really fascinating. Mike, I think you might have wanted to follow up on that.
Yeah, no, I think that I personally have been pretty lucky that we've had a number of projects that are in that construction administration phase, where I think kind of Mary hinted at it. It's, a point that you can kind of go out and interact with somebody in a live sense. So that's actually been, I think, really kind of helpful for me to still kind of go out and have some interaction that we're still very careful and distance on there, but you're able to kind of have that relationship. And so it's kind of a weird dynamic too, that you see them there, but you're all masked up, and we kind of rotate, our meetings to have some then alternating between a digital meeting and then the live meeting. And then when you get to see them on the digital meeting, you can actually see them. I had a client tell me, because we only met a few first times with a mask, and he followed up and said, and so I can tell, my budget expectations were really off just by the way your eyebrows were raised when we were talking about it. So it's kind of these little funny things, or like, you turned an eggplant color. That's the only way I could tell that that wasn't working. So it's been kind of, so that's been nice on a kind of a personal level. On the flip side, we have clients that we've never met, and I think it's been harder. I think you're able to still kind of go through the process and go through the meetings, but I think some of the kind of personal interactions that you have in a meeting live kind of meanders a little bit and has a little bit more life to its own, where Zoom or digital ones, it's, kind of A to B in a time period. And it's, I think we all kind of miss that, the tangents that a live meeting can kind of go on.
Mary, is there something about the client interactions that you'd like to chime in on?
Well, first of all, Mike, thank you for that humor, because I can imagine seeing your client turning eggplant. Well, I wanted to offer a little bit of, maybe a different perspective, because I agree, with what Liz and Mike said, as a consideration, and I know Brenda is going to back me up on this. So, I think with existing clients, people, it's fairly easy to keep a relationship, whether it's in meetings or you schedule a Zoom happy hour, even as things have loosened up, have coffee. What has been challenging in healthcare specifically, and I'm sure this is true in other market sectors, but when you're trying to do business development and develop new clients, because, that's what we all have to do. What's challenging, it's been challenging in healthcare, is the fact that, your clients are out there on the front line dealing with life and death every day because of COVID. And, projects get paused, they go on hold. And I've felt like there's a fine line between, being too aggressive, like, not asking the question, but the underlying question is, when is this project going to start again? Because we all have businesses to run, but then we know our clients are in this highly stressed situation. And so, that for me has been, just a lesson in patience and empathy, because I had a client say that, of a contractor, they said they came to the meeting and they were just too bubbly and happy. Do they not realize what we're going through every day? And so, again, I think it's just this awareness, this personal awareness of the spaces around us, of not just what's going on in our worlds, but really what's going on in our clients' worlds, because there are people out there struggling and we can help them when the time's right. But Brianna, I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think in the beginning, they were, from the healthcare perspective, you could see like a few waves in the firm, right? Healthcare was like on call around the clock from March till May at least. And then you saw some higher ed and workplace interiors were picking up like over the summer, as people were starting to be like, okay, what does the work environment look like? How are we going to get back into school for the higher ed campuses? But I think, to your point, Mary, the healthcare industry has been on such the front line that it's only now, I think, that they're coming up for the slightest bit of air, now that the vaccines seem to be pretty like well-oiled machines when you get to a facility, because even by the time they were able to like have their budgets approved by September, October, November, then they were planning for vaccinations, so like they kept getting hit like every day, every week with something new to deal with. And so I think your point of empathy and patience and understanding that while we can help, this might not be the best time to talk to them about new business, unless it was new business related to how you could help them plan out a pandemic response. So, I think it was our job to be able to be there and responsive when they needed it. And, certainly continue to grow that business development, or certainly make those connections when possible, like you were saying, Mary. But it was also a good time to let them breathe and do what they needed to do, and keep our country safe, because that was their primary mission for a lot of the healthcare facilities.
Yeah, what a wonderful perspective from both of you. I think that that's really important to take this whole situation in its fullest context, and understand that everyone has a different experience and a different way to react to it as well. And being aware and being open and empathetic about it is absolutely key for engaging with both our clients and our teams. I wanted to take a second to remind our audience, halfway through, but please do use the chat. If you guys have a question of our panelists that we can weave into this hour, if you type something in there, we're all able to see it and weave it into the conversation. So don't forget about that. I wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the challenges we had, but maybe most specifically, if there was anything that happened over the last year that was in particular something that was scary, something that happened to our teams, something that happened to our firms that was really unexpected, or something that we didn't necessarily have the tools to immediately deal with. And how do we kind of rise to the challenge? How do we work through that challenge and be able to get ourselves to the other side? So there's like a bazillion different ways that that question can be answered, but just in talking about how our clients, particularly at the healthcare side, have a lot on their plates that are different than us on a normal basis. I'm curious about what we might have that have maybe changed how we operate in a really impactful way. So I don't know who to call on for that one. I'm wondering if Liz or Mike, either one of you had any thoughts that immediately made you think of?
Yeah, I'm just so something that was kind of really scary in the midst of all of this and how we were facing it. I mean, certainly just the personal connections of people that had illness and risk of illness. We have within our team, we have people that live in multi-generational homes. We have people that have higher risk, and so I think probably like everybody, the first reaction was, okay, everybody just stay separate so that you can stay as healthy as you can within your own home environment. So certainly just kind of that was the biggest risk and scare. And then I think amongst all of us personally, I certainly had family members that were affected, and most everyone does, and just how that you can be, you just worry, and so that's a distraction to trying to get the work done, of course, and just and sharing that. So I don't know that that's a very good answer, but that's maybe a starting point. That I don't know, Mike, if you have anything that you can kind of jump off from, and I'll keep pondering that one as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we're kind of in a similar area. Like I mentioned too, we do have a lot of projects that are active in construction, and I think there's been more along the COVID kind of scares that have happened periodically throughout. We've been fortunate enough that we haven't had anyone in our studios get infected, but there's been a few people on different job sites that have. So that's always kind of a scary thing. So we've gotten pretty used to the testing side at Boulder, so we're able to kind of go in there, test, and quarantine ourselves as well too, just to make sure that we're staying healthy, and we're pretty diligent on hand washing and mask wearing. But I think those have been more outside the first kind of couple of days when the pandemic was first kind of realized too, just understanding what was going to happen in the world, and trying to figure out that is all the work going to go away, or is it going to change into a different aspect? I think the business side, there's some of that scary aspect, but that seems that we've remained relatively pretty busy, so we felt really kind of fortunate on that aspect.
Brennan, did you have something to add for the next question?
Yeah, if I could add one more thing about, I think this is both a scary thought plus a rewarding community contribution, but within a couple days after certain parts of the country shutting down, our firm was contacted by the mayor of LA to put together a response plan for taking their I'm blanking out their conference centers and turning them into COVID response, rapid response locations. And so within 24 hours, a team from across the country was able to respond, put together plans, meet, all hours of the night, and between East Coast and West Coast, we were able to almost work, the full entire time to be able to deliver it by 9 a.m. the next morning to the mayor. And I just think that One, the scary part is like, wow, okay, we're doing things like this to prepare. This is incredible, and certainly not something that you would have ever thought you would be working on as a design piece. But then the second part was how everyone, and not just our firm, but other firms and everyone in the community came together in order to do things like this, to respond in timeframes. And I think it showed both the cross collaboration among like technology and the ability to team and work remotely, and just a smooth process to be able to deliver that to the mayor in time per the demands that they needed in order to get it up and running.
Great.
So definitely a scary but memorable project in my lifetime.
Great. Well, there's been some great questions in the chat come up. I'm so glad that we have some of these here. So I was wondering if we could get the second batch of survey questions up to kind of help get the juices flowing for a couple of questions about the future of where we're going too. So, we've definitely talked about some of the challenges that we've had over the last year, and what are the lessons learned, and how do we really take this forward to really adapt and use this into our future? What kind of I like this question from Jim, where what kind of things that we've learned about a hybrid or remote working model influences our thinking about plans for our physical offices in the future. Curious if anybody with significant office space is kind of rethinking that model now, with hybrid being so much of a really important part of our work. So let's see, Mary, I'd love to ask that question of you, and I thought you may have also had something to add to the last round of questions that I didn't want to skip over if you had that too.
That's okay. I was just going to say, kind of reminiscing over what happened a year ago, one of the scariest things was after 2 weeks, we just know, remember everyone said we're going home and we're working at home for 2 weeks. But I think one of the scariest things was the realization that our country was completely unprepared for this, and the shortage of masks, and how, and many firms did this, but they started using their 3D printers to make masks. And, people at home, because we're talented, crafty, like to make things, people were making masks. I just thought that was a really great way for people to jump in and feel like they were helping in some way. With regards to the question about the hybrid, no one has any answers. And, I think that predictions are, just so hard to make. But I think some of the concerns are the closeness. We all would, well, I'm not sure about your offices, but our offices are, it was designed for more collaboration. So smaller work areas, closer together, more collaboration space. So the likely outcome of that is we're going to have to figure out ways for our teams to come back together, but not be all on top of each other because we can't distance. And the other piece of that is with us all being on Zoom calls all the time, and I don't think anyone thinks that's going away completely. Someone will always be on a call, that we're not set up for the privacy. And the privacy being privacy of the conversation going on, but also people out in the work areas, the open office areas trying to work. And one comment I've heard is, well, when I go to the office and work, we're on a hybrid flexible work schedule, although most people are still working at home. When people do go in, they say it's just so it's just so noisy, even when only 1 or 2 people are talking, that they wear their noise reducing headphones. But the contradiction of that is, what's the point of being in the office and collaborating, and the social and the cultural aspects are when you have to wear headphones? So, I think there's just a lot of contradictions, and it's going to be hard to work all of these items out so people feel safe, so they feel like they're part of a cultural aspect of an office. But again, I don't think there's any answers. I think this is going to evolve, and I think that 6 months, we may still be in the same place we are now, because one thing I've been thinking a lot about is the vaccine. Some people are going to get it, some people aren't. Who's going to be comfortable coming into the office with people who haven't? I think this is just going to create a whole different dialogue and dynamic that isn't being discussed yet. So hope that answers the question. That was kind of
Sure.
a maybe out there response, but it's
Yeah,
complicated.
well, I think you're right. I think no one really knows exactly where we're going to be in 6 months from now. And I don't know if the survey questions have been able to pop up yet, but that's one of our questions is 6 months. Yeah, a lot of people don't know. A lot of people do think this isn't the end of hybrid working. I saw, Mike, that you may have wanted to follow up on Mary's comment, but also wondering if I could ask you if you do have any long-term strategies at play for the future of remote work. That kind of gets to one of the questions I saw pop up in the chat.
Yeah, with our physical space too, I think we're definitely evaluating that internally right now, in particular on the Boulder side. So, things are working kind of really nice right now. We only have, like I mentioned, 3 people rotating in and out, but we actually have 7 people. So when they all kind of come back into the office, that we've actually grown enough over during the pandemic that we don't totally have seats for everyone to sit. And if we wanted everyone to kind of come in all at one time, we don't necessarily have the space for it. So trying to, facilitate an environment where we still have the collaboration that you want, and whether it's breakout and conference rooms and that stuff, trying to pinpoint, what is the right space, or maybe what we have actually works really well, and that continues on into the indefinite period of time, and even just the timing of it too, since we don't really know if or when things are going to totally normalize, and at what point do you invest kind of capital into a nicer facility, or when you don't. I think it's been, we've had countless kind of discussions on it, and we've picked times, and we're gonna do this, we're gonna implement, and then we've kind of throttled back, and so far that has been the right choices for us so far. But it's hard out there, and even just kind of little things like on your desk right now, we have places, stations, docks, everyone kind of plugs in, and that's rotated and cleaned all the time. But it's a little kind of less personal, as you kind of go in. It's almost more, I don't know if that's great for the future. I don't know if people want to kind of have their own kind of, here's my spot, here's where I go, or if they're okay kind of mixing and matching a little bit more. So it's debates that we're having for sure.
Yeah. At Roland and Broughton, I think we are in a similar situation in our Denver studio, where we do have more people than desks. And so one of the things that we're doing is making sure that nobody gets a desk. We want everyone to have equitable access to a workstation should they want to come and go. Because in the future, we do see people wanting to kind of stick to this hybrid model. What we're learning is people do enjoy being at home as much as they may enjoy being in the studio to collaborate. And so I wanted to weave in a question from Scott that I'm seeing in the chat. It just came up, and he said, yesterday, I asked all of my staff if they wanted to come back into the office full time once everyone got the vaccine. Surprisingly, 3/4 of the staff preferred to work half-time from home. Have any of our panelists' firms experienced the same reaction? Liz, you look like you're ready to tackle.
Yes, yeah. So we actually took a survey of our team about 3 weeks ago, and a series of questions, some of them similar to what we're talking about right now. And the 2 things that came out loud and clear is that to a T, everybody was interested in a hybrid approach going forward, 2 to 3 in the office or 2 to 3 from home. The details are still getting worked out. And then similarly to what Mary was saying, the acoustics issue with the go-to meetings, the Teams meetings and all of that, we do have a really nice open environment. But the acoustics are definitely going to need to be something that we look at. So those are 2 things that to Scott's question that came up from our team and the response. So I thought I would just offer that. Amanda, I think you're muted.
Amanda, you're on mute. If you want to circle back up on that comment, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, just to kind of show like how this can be challenging. Anyway, I would love to see if there's anybody else that has any long-term strategies in place to deal with some of those situations that both Liz and Mary have mentioned so far about being a different working environment now. So Mary, it looks like you might be ready to chime in.
Well, I was kind of still back on Scott's question. Hi, Scott. I agree wholeheartedly with what Liz said. And I do believe that people are going to want to just have this hybrid model and have the opportunities to be flexible. You know, I think what it comes down to really is flexibility. But one interesting comment that has come out that I've heard is people are saying, well, now that we know we can work from home and management knows we're productive and actually working, when I get sick, I'm going to be more likely to stay at home. And I think someone touched on that earlier, but you know, that is something that we all dealt with as people, you know, sounding like they're just terribly ill coming into the office and not having, you know, really any consideration for the people around them. I hope that's going to change dramatically, that now we can stay home, and if we're not really terribly sick and feel like working, that we can still work. So I'm not sure I was ready to jump onto your next question because I was still back on Scott's question. So I'm going to let someone else take that next question.
Perfectly fine. Well, oh, look at this, saved by the bell. We have the poll results for the next poll come up with from our audience. What do you miss most when working remotely? And majority, yeah, you know, close to collaboration and learning, followed by social interactions, mentorships on the list. And what you like most about working remotely is that life work flexibility. So yeah. I think a lot of people have been talking about, you know, these hybrid models or working remotely, really fulfilling a lot of those things that people are looking for in continuing that on. This is a good kind of question from the chat that, well, there's two. I want to make sure I get to this one from Darren, but maybe more of a logistics question. Does anyone have a policy in place or a system in place rather for how sick hours are being recorded when working from home?
Well, I'm going to jump in on that because I mentioned that. And Stephanie, thank you for asking that question. I would say no. I'm not sure anyone has really thought about that. You know, it's a great point that we're gonna have to really start looking at. I mean, I think you know, at some point it just comes down to honesty, right? And how we record our time, and are we really working or not? But it is a reminder that policies are going to have to be looked at of how we treat people fairly and people behave fairly with this new hybrid model, because that probably hasn't really been, I haven't thought about that. So thanks again. I'll bring that forward with my leadership team.
Brenda.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an element to all of this that has been on the honor system, and you know, people are getting their work done and they're working efficiently, and they're probably working more than they have been in the past. So I think it's up to us as leaders to try to validate whether or not we need to be monitoring that or taking it as it is. If a team member says they're sick and they're not working for a couple hours, you know, we don't have a sick versus PTO. It's all the same. So we don't actually ever monitor the sick hours versus PTO. But I think for those that do, it's a matter of trust. And if you do have a policy in place, obviously, think it through before issuing it, knowing that there are always all these different things that we have, you know, unforeseen circumstances that we just went through. Absolutely.
I'm going to weave together two questions that have come from our audience, and it's one from Darren and then one from Ben. And I had sat on or I listened to a panelist discussion for AIA Los Angeles, and they talked a lot about generational differences and how new technology can be adapted and how that might be influencing some of the difficulties in, you know, uniformly adapting some of the new tools that we might find being useful to work efficiently and collaborate better in this hybrid model. So Ben asks, do you find that technology used to be the most challenging part of remote working? And do we find that to be kind of the same across the board? And what are kind of the same, excuse me, what are some of the ways in which we resolve the problem with technology? So I'm wondering if maybe, Mike, you mentioned VPNs before. I'm wondering if maybe there's something about technology and the way everybody might adapt them that you could speak to.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we've noticed internally too is just kind of an overwhelming amount of different paths of communication that come in, you know, and I think that that's actually been a challenge for us where you're not in the office. Some of those just everyday conversations is you can just, you know, ask a question, hey, you know, hey Bob, you know, what do you think about this? And other people are kind of hearing, you're having these design communications where now you're having so many more of those coming in from different avenues versus, you know, you get them from text, Teams, Zoom, email, just even every job site has it, whether it's Procore, and just trying to figure out a way to kind of manage all that, I think is, you know, something that we're trying to navigate as well. You know, every email you send out, you know, grows into 6. So, you know, even just kind of those basic things too that we used to do are just picking up a phone and just calling somebody and talking to them. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a Zoom call, but just trying to, you know, manage that and kind of consolidate some of those things has been a little bit of a challenge. I don't know if other people have kind of experienced that same amount, but, you know, emails have actually kind of swelled, and a lot of that kind of stuff in digital communication has, you know, increased. So trying to find that balance for us. You know, I think there's other kind of nice things, like I think there's some, you know, virtual reality and project walkthroughs that have kind of, you know, development of that on our end has kind of accelerated. So we're excited about some of those things, and even, you know, Matterport videos where you can walk through and measure, and trying to have some of those things that you can't get in the field with clients that are at a distance. Those have been nice. Again, I think Teams works really well for us. We use Bluebeam a ton. I'm sure everyone else is kind of using those as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. And, you know, since we're getting close to the hour, I want to ask one more like lightning round question to make sure we're trying to hit a lot of our participants' questions. So a question from Jack Smith, maybe to round out the questions. What are your clients asking of you in terms of designing the new modern office? And do they have any ideas, or are they looking for you for ideas? Who would like to tackle that question?
I'll go, since it's lightning round. I'm just going to say one thing: more touchless, you know, whether it's auto operators on, you know, soap dispensers, doors, whatever. Just, you don't have to touch anything.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Mary. I think more touchless and collaboration spaces that are such that you can be distanced but still collaborating. You know, hopefully in the future we're not having to worry about being distanced, but I think it's still something that's on everyone's mind right now.
Great. Sorry, Liz, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, even before the pandemic, I think that there was the tide was shifting a little bit on open office areas and acoustics. And I mentioned that personally within our office, but we also hear that from our clients and office areas of trying to have that, but improve the acoustics. And I think that's something that's ongoing for the industry.
That's a great one. One more lightning question. I like this one from Jenny. Do the panelists think that flexibility to work from home after COVID will help new parents in the design fields? Now that the stigma of working from home and having flexible hours is potentially diminished in hybrid working models, is it realistic to hope for greater representation of mothers in leadership positions?
I can take.
I'm happy to take that one. I had 2 under 2 at the start of the pandemic, so I definitely think there's been such an understanding of you know, being able to work odd hours, being able to work around what you need to do as a new mother, or you know, a female growing in leadership, from a client side and from our own internal side. I mean, if I needed to be off video for a few minutes, the client didn't have any issue with that. Again, once you build that relationship with them, of course, it's not something you would do immediately, but I think everyone had the understanding of empathy again towards the challenges that people were going through, and So yeah, I mean, it's always, like I said earlier, it's always kind of noisy around here and no one seems to mind.
That's great. Like Liz, is there anybody else who surveyed their staff? This is a lightning round question too. And how have those survey results kind of pointed to a way forward?
We've spoken to all of our staff kind of individually, and we kind of periodically do that just to make sure that, you know, workload and, you know, just kind of person that they're managing everything okay. And most people do really want to kind of come into the office and have that social, but the flexibility seems paramount too. So the hybrid model just seems like that's where we're going to land. I think like people like to have that little bit of control and find a little bit better work-life balance, just to kind of manage everything that's happening in their lives, and being able to the flexibility to kind of manage their work when they need to do it too.
That's great.
I might just add, Amanda, that one of the outcomes of our survey is that people want to be involved. They want to be part of the solution. You know, all of us as architects care about our workspace. So I think that's been the exciting thing, is an opportunity to engage with the team to figure that out. It's not going to come from the top down. It's going to be something that we create together.
That's great. So I don't know if we have time for one last question before Mike joins us for closing remarks, but we'll throw one in there. And it's from Stephanie. What is the 40-hour work week looking like for everyone? Are you mostly looking at productivity, tracking things with software, or using an honor system?
I'll say that at this point, it's been the honor system. And I think that going forward for the longer term policies, we do need to have kind of an awareness of the overlap of people's availability and time. I know we have clients that are in multiple time zones, so that's always been a challenge. But I think in terms of kind of how our team operates, we do need to have kind of a core working time so that, you know, we do know that people are available and able to answer questions. Now, of course, the last year has been kind of an ad hoc, you know, solution to that. But I think going forward for longer term work from home policies, that is going to need to be part of our solution.
Yeah, Amanda, you're on mute again.
Thanks. I just want to thank everybody for sharing their stories with us today. And I'm really encouraged by everything that I'm hearing about today, from the resilience of our firms and our confidence that we've got a great way to work forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike to close us out.
Sure, thanks. And what is this 40-hour work week you speak of? This was a great conversation. I really appreciate it. And Mary, I'm reminded of the temporary nature that became permanent. My wife and I, on commencement weekend, were on campus at Boulder last year, and it was a ghost town. So we figured that will never happen again. Hopefully, you know, fingers crossed, in our lifetime. But the quaint thing about that visit was there were signs on all the academic department stores saying 15 days to slow the spread. And it had been well more than 15 days by that time. So this is also a conversation we are having, just so our members know, because our lease is up at the end of this year. So we're actively having this conversation. Our workforce has changed. We've had 3 depart and 2 come in over the last year. And so we're wrestling with the same things you are. And I'm soaking all this into. I want to thank all of you as panelists for the great conversation today, for the Business of Architecture Committee for continuing to bring these ideas forward. So Liz, Brenda, Mike, Mary, Amanda, thanks so much. We're just, nobody has all the answers, but we're learning together as we go. So that's the important thing. Also want to thank everybody for participating and let you know about 2 things coming up in the near future. Next week, we have another virtual connect called Zero Energy Schools, How Innovative Concrete Systems Are Making It Possible. That's proposed for one HSW learning unit. It's presented by Greg Lewis, who's an architect with the National Ready Mix Concrete Association. And then on April 7th, we'll have more localized conversations with section town halls. So stay tuned for those. They're both on our website calendar. And as always, these events are free to our members. So thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon. Have a great rest of the week.